My name is Zettler-Mann. I'm the Executive Director of SYRCL, the South Yuba River Citizens League. Welcome everybody to this film and this panel. Really excited to be here. It's going to be fantastic. For those who don't know, the Wild and Scenic Film Festival is a production of SYRCL, the South Yuba River Citizens League. We're a local nonprofit for over 40 years. We've been uniting the community to protect and restore the Yuba River watershed. SYRCL's Wild and Scenic Film Festival inspires environmental activism and a love for nature through film. Our goal is to encourage everyone to learn more about ways that we can do more to save our threatened planet. And on that note, we would encourage all of you to sign our petition. Every year there's a Film Fest action, and this year with our theme of real action, it's incredibly poignant to try to save the threatened salmon, and so we are asking Governor Newsom to make sure that there's enough water flowing from the Yuba all the way out to the Golden Gate Bridge so that our salmon can make their journey out to the sea, come back, and spawn. There's more information at the action table on your way out, so please join us in telling Governor Newsom to let the salmon swim. So the film this morning that we're all here to see, California's Watershed Healing. It provides an in-depth view into the connection between forest health and water security. And afterwards, as I'm sure you are all aware, we're going to have a fantastic panel discussion with Dr. Roger Bales, Dr. Martha Conklin, we've got Secretary of Natural Resources Wade Crowfoot, Ellie Lano from the Forest Service, and Willie Little Z from Yuba Water Agency. I'll be moderating it. It's still early, apparently, in my mind. Really looking forward to that. In addition, this festival couldn't happen without the tremendous local and national support. Hundreds of volunteers are working with us to ensure that this festival is a success. Please join me in giving them all a round of applause. In addition, there are a number of individuals, local and national business partners making this event possible. We would not be here without their support, and so please learn more about their mission and how you can help support them. To that point, this session is very generously sponsored by Yuba Water Agency. Thank you very much for your support of this event. You can also support SYRCL and the Wild and Scenic by making a donation and or becoming a member. All funds during the festival, up to $10,000, will be matched $4, and that was a great time to join, to renew, to make a donation. You are supporting the critical work that we are doing to protect the Yuba River. You can sign up to become a member at the Yuba River Action Tables or at yubariver.org. So this is where I turn into a little bit of a flight attendant. Emergency exits, there's behind you, there's one on the side, there are some back here. As we leave the theater, please only go out that door. We're full, and with a little bit of standing room around the back, so if you've got waters, coffees, things like that, make sure you've got a good grasp on them. Lids are on tight so that if you kick them, they don't fall over, they don't make a mess, that kind of thing. We heard a great reminder, make sure your cell phones are off, silented, that kind of thing, so that they don't go on during the theaters. I think we're good in terms of seating. I don't see any gaps, which is what we want. And so before we take it over and start the film, I would like to introduce the director to come up and say a couple words. Jim.
I'm very honored once again to be in this film festival. This is something that I cherish, particularly this community. I grew up in these mountains. Berkeley, though I live, but I've spent quite a bit of time in these mountains, and they mean a whole lot to me. It's kind of home to me. And that's kind of way it sort of oriented me when I did this film, because it just felt like I was coming home. And I want to thank those who were in attendance, who were participating. This is really important to me. You've honored the film by you being here, and I really appreciate it. And I'm sure as was mentioned, it'll be a fantastic panel discussion, and I'm also honored the fact that all of you have shown up. So anyway, you don't hear me.
People don't often think of watershed as a security issue, but when you back up the bus and you look at what are the foundational principles that our safety and security are relying upon, it's climate security, water security, food security, and ensuring that those things are adequately taken into account and planned for is an unmet challenge, I would say, in the United States. The impact or the relationship between snow, snowpack, rainfall, the health of the forest, and then wildfire is direct, and it's caused loss of life and loss of property in California.
All right, well, thank you all very much for being here. Fantastic film. Before we kick off the Q&A, just introduce everybody that we've got up here. Starting on the left, we've got Dr. Martha Conklin. She's a professor emerita of Civil and Environmental Engineering from UC Merced. Dr. Roger Bales, professor of Engineering and Management at UC Merced. Secretary of Natural Resources, Wade Crowfoot. Forest Service Supervisor Ellie Lano, and Jim of Yuba Water Agency. We'll see there at the end. So I imagine there are questions in the audience, but I have the mic, so I get to go first. There are, a number of themes, of course, throughout this film, but one of the ones that is sort of the community outreach portion of the film, the story I really like, is the need and the opportunity for helping people understand education. And one of the big ones there is like, what does a healthy forest actually look like? And when we think healthy forest, is that actually healthy? Anybody want to sort of comment? Are there other themes, other sort of big education opportunities where shifting public perception generally is going to be really important to keep this kind of work moving forward successfully? And happy to pass the mic. Yeah.
Well, thanks, and thanks, Jim, for making this movie. I think it was really, really well done. And it's awesome to be here at Wild and Scenic with SYRCL, that was referenced in the movie, with the Yuba Water Agency that's providing a really big model. So you guys are actually showing the way forward. Look, I think this is a paradigm shift. Our agency that I lead includes CAL FIRE and our Department of Water Resources, Fish and Wildlife, Sierra Nevada Conservancy, Tahoe Conservancy. So we're right in the middle of all this. And for all of us, this has involved a lot of learning. Coming into this job, I never had any conception of the traditional practices of Native Americans and to the scale that they've exercised that over time with this cultural fire. And it's been a paradigm shift. I mean, my formative years backpacking in California, a healthy forest was the super green forest that you couldn't see through. And I had that, and it resonated with me when you saw, charred ground being negative. I think this has really involved a paradigm shift. Likewise with prescribed fire. We still have a lot of challenges putting fire on the ground across the state because people are scared of fire for good reason. And they don't understand, the benefits, and the smoke impacts, the local smoke impacts can be intense. So to me, there's continued education that has to happen, and that's why SYRCL and groups, legitimate, validated groups on the ground are really important in helping educate people what we need.
I'll just add, so Wade just said paradigm shift, and I heard in the film social license, and I also want to thank Jim for putting this film together. And this is an educational tool to educate you all on what is actually going on in our forests in the Sierras. And this is just one step in a major effort we have to restore our forests. And social license, I think what this film does is it kind of confirms what we have done, especially Ellie and Yuba Water in our local backyard here. We've basically assumed that we now have social license to restore our forests and get away from this, loving our forests to death. I grew up loving our forests the way they were, but unfortunately it was talked about in the film, that lack of decision or the management decision to let our forests just grow was a management decision. And now we need to shift away from that. And we need to go do something. And Ellie summed it up in the film. I think he said we either need to go thin these forests by hand, mechanically, or with fire. I mean, it's that simple. It kind of closed out there. There's simple solutions to this stuff. And I think by sitting here with you today as we're confirming that we have social license to go do this. That's what I would like to do, or at least talk about.
Do we still have? Okay. Hey, everyone. Thanks for being here. So I think there's often this perception that if we don't do anything, things are going to stay the same. And I am here to tell you that that is absolutely not true. Wildfire is one that people talk about a lot. But I also want to share, even when we don't have big wildfire years, our forests are still changing. So in 2023, last year, just on the Tahoe National Forest, 6.5 million trees died. And the year before, that number was 3.5 million. And that's a result of climate change, droughts, and all those stressors. So even when we don't have big fires, our forests are dying because of everything that you heard about: climate change, overly dense conditions, disease, drought. And so in some ways, the forest is speaking to us. It's telling us that there are too many trees. However, if we leave all of those, over the last 2 years, about 10 million trees just standing there, the risk of large-scale fire increases substantially, right? And then, if there is a fire, it's changing. It not only takes out those standing dead trees, it takes out all of the trees at a very intense rate, and that's what you saw. And it makes it very difficult after a very intense fire for those forests to return. I'm not saying it could never happen, but it certainly won't happen in any of our lifetimes. So I think this notion that if we don't do anything, things are going to stay static, we just have to get out of that mindset. I know that for some people it's troubling to see machines in the forest taking out trees, but I just want to tell you that we are doing it with the best science available to us. We're not saying it's perfect, but we're saying that it's better, that we're making progress towards something that we all want, which is a sustainable forest and a sustainable watershed.
One more, yeah.
And I just wanted to add something I learned when I think it was one of my first field trips. It was listening to someone that was at the King Fire, and it was someone in the fire service. They were talking about standing on the ridge and hearing the animals that were burning, and that is something I just want to think. We've talked about the trees, but we're really talking about the whole ecosystem. There's nothing left at a catastrophic fire. And I think that's, when we think about it from a human perspective, we also need to think about it from a biodiversity perspective, and really some of the things we really love. So I just wanted to add to that. Yeah.
Perfect. All right, hands, quick one there.
Yeah, I mean, what we see in urban areas is the insurance companies just cutting and running. We're leaving the state, we're not insuring your house. Oh, you have an ivy growing on the wall, that's going to be a catastrophic fire, or whatever. I heard a glimmer of hope that the insurance companies are approachable and maybe see this as a preventative. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, so the question was about insurance companies, something that is near and dear to all of us that live up here, and sort of insurance market forces and pressures, maybe moving those industries out of the system, but hope for getting them to stay and so we can live here. Anybody? Yeah, actually, here, let's send that one down. It's probably a little easier.
Great question. So we have seen a little bit more involvement by the insurance industry in a couple of fronts. So you heard Zach Knight in the film talk about the forest resilience bond. So a couple, not a lot, but a couple of insurance companies have invested in that forest resilience bond. Now they're expecting a return, but they are investing. They're coming out on field trips. They're coming into the forest. The other thing that we are trying to do is, so in the insurance industry, that they have this disaster model, and for the most part, all the work that you saw, all the work that we're doing in the forest does not get included in their disaster model and reducing risk. So we're really pushing them to show the research that this kind of work does reduce risk. And so in those communities and in those places where we are doing this risk, that they take that into account into their models.
Yeah, I was just going to acknowledge it. First of all, it's a huge problem, not only in California, but the rest of the country. I spent some time with our insurance commissioner, which is like a publicly elected statewide office recently. And there's a National Association of Insurance Commissioners. And the insurance commissioners in the Gulf states, for example, are experiencing the same thing, where insurance companies are pulling out because the risk of hurricanes and the threats from the hurricanes have gotten so large. So there's a big question around, given all of these changes with the changing climate and the impacts, broadly, how is that going to affect insurance across the world? In California, our insurance commissioner has the potential to set certain standards on the insurance companies, including the amount of rates that they can pay. The challenge is, some insurance companies will drop out of California versus abide those rules. So it's a real balance. One thing we're working on in Sacramento is, to Ellie's point, can we have the insurance companies recognize where the work is getting done and then provide affordable insurance plans in those areas, including if your home has the defensible space that it technically needs, if your community actually has fuel breaks around the community, et cetera. And we're seeing interest from the insurance companies. But I can tell you, it is priority 1A in Sacramento among these, state leaders to figure out this insurance problem, because it's untenable that rural people can't get insurance or affordable insurance.
Saw Roy first there.
So, in the county of Nevada, the Fire Safe Council is doing, I think, a great job to help neighbors understand how important it is to give up the vegetation, the concentration of trees in their 5, 10, and 20 acre areas. However, there are a lot of neighbors that say, well, I moved to the woods to have the woods. So there definitely needs to be a change in attitude about being safe, getting insurance, and enjoying your privacy. So how much are you folks working with individually the Fire Safe Councils, supporting fire-wise communities, and looking at it from the individual standpoint of their role being surrounded by the forest?
So the question for the recording and all of you is about the relationship between fire-wise communities, which are responsible and kind of help lead the sort of forest conservation, forest clearing work that we saw on the Tahoe, but at the individual parcel. So really bridging that gap between the wildlands, the Tahoe National Forest, and the buffer, the urban corridor, and the sort of cooperation, collaboration between those two entities.
Well, that's a topic, a great topic that involves both research and policy. In the film, you saw Crystal Colden, a professor at UC Merced, and that's her research area. And I hesitate, but I can say contact her for what's going on. Martha and I don't really work on at that level, but there are many people working on the research side of how we can better do that. The policy side.
Well, we think about it in concentric circles, so that the smallest concentric circle is in the community. And to your point, there are things that communities need to do to keep themselves safe, and there's things that residents need to do to keep themselves safe. So fire safe council is absolutely essential. Those communities that are fire-wise communities, absolutely essential. We know, for example, that Paradise, as destructive and tragic as that was, lives were saved because of the work of their fire safe council in terms of getting people out. And they had actually done some thinning along the roads that were actually, places where people escaped. So absolutely important. And our CAL FIRE is working to address that challenge. Yeah, we get it. People like to be in the woods. You don't want to look right at your neighbor. That's in part why you got that 3-acre parcel, right, and moved up to the mountains. But look what happens if we actually don't do what's needed. So tightest concentric circle in the community, then around the community. We need fuel breaks to let firefighters take a stand to protect these communities. That's likely what saved South Lake Tahoe in the Caldor fire, was those fuel breaks that the Forest Service up there put in with the community. And then what we saw here is that broadest concentric circle is landscape wide. Because at the end of the day, if there is a catastrophic wildfire in the North Yuba watershed and it gets hot enough it doesn't matter what fuel break exists, especially given these ember-driven fires. So you need all three.
And I'll expand on that, all three. So I think the question was, what are you all doing to help these fire-wise communities or local fire safe councils? And so Wade just talked about the concentric circles, and he built out from basically like the home or the community out into the landscape or the forest. Yuba Water Agency, because of our interest as a statewide water manager and a watershed manager, we work from the outside concentric circle in. And so we're directly investing with Ellie and others in landscape scale forestry, but we also locally are sponsoring our Yuba County Fire Safe Council in educating the public on home hardening, educating the public on if you develop a community-based fire-wise plan or fire-safe plan, we will help invest with you to get the work done to thin the forest around these communities. And in fact, we have not only partnerships with the Tahoe National Forest for funding and implementation, but in the non-Tahoe National Forest area, the state responsibility area, we have partnerships with Wade's group, the CAL FIRE, in healthy forest grants to thin the forest on these. I heard someone say the 5, 10, and 20 acre parcels. We're helping implement forest restoration on a smaller scale on those parcels, kind of like the urban-rural interface with the help of CAL FIRE. So it is the concentric circles, and it's who is investing and working in what circle, and Yuba Water Agency starting on the outer circle, but working into the inner circle with the community-based projects.
So I had a question there, and I think one over there as well.
I just read a little snippet that said one of the biggest changes in our future is zoning changes, the way we live and work, travel, and recreate. What I see along the foothills of the Sierra is a tremendous effort to develop into the wildland-urban interface and change land use from agriculture, from timber, into residential development. And it just seems to me that somehow we need to do something about it. I just saw the Attorney General help to purchase a land development down in San Diego County to take it out of the development plan and leave it as is in the wildland-urban interface. We need to do more of that. Any comments?
So anybody comments on the idea of making sure that some of those wildland-urban interfaces areas stay that way, and the desire to develop and push into those forest boundary areas sort of slow down so that we don't have the high density of housing?
I mean, that's another really let me acknowledge that as a really sticky challenge in California. So typically, local or land use is a local decision, and particularly rural counties that don't have a big tax base, that need affordable housing for folks that want to live there and work there, build out into the wildland-urban interface. About 1/4, about 10 million Californians live in these high-hazard wildfire zones or this urban wildland interface. So there's a big balance that's needed. Right now at the Board of Forestry, which is sort of the regulatory body on this topic, they're updating guidelines around what development is actually even allowed in that urban wildland interface. What access and egress do you need? What's absolutely prohibited? And it's challenging. There are really intense groups on every side. Those that want to push more housing, larger communities, those that are terrified about those communities creating more fire risk. So you'll see updates around those regulations, those prohibitions, but it's going to continue to be a balance.
So I've got a question there, then close, then back.
Aaron, can I add to that last question?
Yeah. Sorry.
To jump in. The zoning and land-based stuff is a local issue, and I'll give you kind of a local perspective from Yuba County. The CAL FIRE fire severity maps were just updated within the last month, and so I open it up, I look at it, and I look at where I live, and I say, great. I live in a floodplain. Okay, so I'm safe, right? But then I look at where the fire severity is in our foothills, and it's like, oh my gosh, like we're looking at high and extreme in most of the foothills of Yuba County. Well, then I don't see it on the map, but I mentally place the floodplain over that same map, and there's just this little strip of safe area that's not in the floodplain and is not in the high or severe forest area. So where do we build homes? It's a policy question, but you either have floodplain or you have these fire issues. The one thing with the fire issue is you as an individual have a decision on managing. You can make an impact on your own fire risk with your own property by home hardening and having fire-wise communities, these things we just talked about. On the floodplain, on the flood scale, it's much different. We're talking about like Army Corps of Engineers and Department of Water Resources levies and major investments there that you don't necessarily have a direct effect on.
Yeah, great. All right, and back there.
So we talked about so far educating our public, right? We talked about concentric circles and talking about fire safe, communities, and all of these things. We talked about a lot of different agencies. We have a lot of great representatives here. My question is, what the big picture? Who's missing from the table? Who else do we need to bring to take this idea and this? What I see as a potential solution, you all have done a really good job explaining it. Who else needs to come to the table to level up?
That's a great question. So the question is essentially, from an implementation standpoint, who's missing, what's next in terms of actually getting this kind of work done at the pace and scale that we need to?
I think what we saw in the film is the value of partnerships. That is, it takes a community. The new paradigm that we're trying to get into is not just that the Forest Service manages all the public lands, which is over 20% of the state, but they do it through the sort of partnerships that Ellie and Willie and other colleagues have been involved in, where you bring different interests together. The new paradigm is to manage the forest as a multi-benefit asset if you're going to manage it. Sustainable forests means that you get the multiple benefits for people. You have resilience and biodiversity, but you also have environmental justice, and you don't get that with just a single purpose management. So, even some of the capacity constraints that Ellie talked about in the film, they can be overcome when you have these partnerships.
Yeah, and I just want to expand on that. We have to create what some people are calling a restoration economy. We can't accomplish what we need to just with federal and state funding, because that's just not going to get us far enough. And that federal and state funding goes through cycles. As an example, we had a couple of pretty good years of federal and state funding. The next couple of years are not looking so good. So then what? Are we going to lose all of the momentum that we've created because there's no actual private capital, private economy that's supporting this work? And you saw some of the ideas, but we need to take some of those ideas to scale, because most of that stuff you saw in terms of wood products and wood utilization, it's at such a small scale, it's not actually making the impact that it could. And so how do we get from sort of that research and development phase to broad scale implementation, so that there's a market, so that it doesn't cost so much to do this work, and there's actually some economic value that's driven?
I got one more just quick tidbit. Yeah, the other big picture is the goal of the Forest Service and the state together is 1 million acres per year treated. The costs are coming at just about $2,000 an acre just to do the work on the ground. That's not including the administrative costs. So you do the arithmetic. What if it's costing over $2,000 an acre and you're doing 1 million acres a year?
Yeah, I'll say the good news is there's more funding getting spent on these upfront proactive projects to protect against wildfire risk than ever before. State government spent over the last few years $3 billion on these projects. We have 1,000 of these projects that we're partially funding across the state. The federal government is now spending more money on the ground in California than it ever has. So that's the good news. The bad news is we haven't cracked the nut and help these emerging industries, environmentally sustainable industries, to actually reach scale, to create that economic incentive to help us. We're subsidizing things like advanced biofuels and hydrogen production from the forest products. We're trying to build demand for this mass timber, this small cross-laminated timber, but we're not there yet. So that holds a lot of promise. I've spent the weekend watching films on these solutions, and there's so many good solutions, and we just have to help them scale. So how do we do that? We're working on it, but we're not there.
Okay, we got one more here, and then we're going to go back out to a question.
One of the things I wanted to bring up was the cost of it. The other thing is this is a statewide problem. I think Jim did a very good introduction for that in the movie. And I know, the water agencies that have been the most active also control their water. But a lot of these water agencies don't control the water. They're sitting up in the foothills, but it's really the downstream users that own the water because of the way the water rights were given. So I'm just saying this is a statewide issue and something that really needs to be addressed. And I'm at UC Merced, and I've listened to people at Merced. They get their water. They have the water rights to the Merced River. They do not want to invest in the restoration because they got the water rights. So they said the people that live up there should take care of it. So I think that is a conversation that needs to be a long-term conversation. It's not going to be an easy one, but it's something that I think that we all have to address.
All right, Aaron, I have one-liner. Can I
One
add
more. One-liner.
Just
Absolutely.
So Wade talked about these emerging technologies of the forest products, and we saw part of that at the end of the film. Here's the one-liner. We don't have to create the economy. We have to integrate into it. 80% of the forest products consumed in California come from outside California. So the economy is there. We need to integrate into it.
A worthy one-liner. All right.
So I grew up here in the Sierra Nevada. I'm a second generation from Grass Valley. I'm a fifth generation Californian. I've seen the state change, and I'm inspired by John Muir, who founded the Sierra Club, and Gary Snyder, who wrote, if you could read a book, it's called Practice of the Wild. I was an engineer on ships all over the world for 30 years. I burned hydrocarbons, took all the goodies to all the other little piggies, and I finally did something important, which was, as you can see on my hoodie, I went to Sea Shepherd to help save the whales in Antarctica. Being an engineer on ships, the full command of technology, my vision is that if we put a power plant on every ridgetop between Kern River in Seattle or Kern River in Vancouver, we could harvest the fuel loading in the forest and do what's called pyrocatalytic conversion. We make fuel, synthetic fuel, from dry chips. Bring labor, and this is really complicated because you've got to have talent, you got to have technology, and you have to have these variables of labor and competence in the forest, safety, labor safety. But imagine having a power plant on every ridgetop between Southern California and the north. What can you guys respond to in terms of that possibility of this coming to fruition? So pyrocatalytic conversion basically takes dry chips, turns it into gas, runs it in an engine, and then makes power.
So the question there is, again, kind of getting at that idea. What are some of these innovative technologies, innovative solutions so that we can get this kind of work kind of self-sustaining in the economy and being driven and continue to happen?
So I'll start on that one. So Yuba Water Agency is working with a handful of folks to research what type of technology we can use to take care of these forest fuels. You see in the film piles of forest debris that right now are just open burned right now. So that's our default program. And you're saying use this catalytic technology, and there's so many technologies. There's 150-year-old technology where you just do the old school, burn it, create steam, and create electricity, which in my mind would be better than just open burning, because at least you're offsetting some fossil fuels that are on the grid. But we don't necessarily have the social license for that right now. I talked about social license earlier. Right now, the public, the society views that as carbon emitting, and it is. It's carbon emitting. But what is our alternative? Our alternative right now is either our forests burn like they've been burning, or we open burn. We need to continue to invest in these technologies that create forest products out of this material as much as possible. And then the waste stream, we need to find the best and most usable form of fuel. And there's so many different synthetic fuels. It's almost weekly that I have someone, because I'm just partnering in the space, people use Yuba Water Agency as kind of an entry to the discussion. I have a solution, whether it's some type of green hydrogen or some type of renewable natural gas. And this is the first I've heard of the term, the catalytic solution. But we're looking at all these solutions. And I just tell these folks that are bringing this to me, if you bring me something that is close to economical, close to, doesn't need 10 times the dollar input to get 1 times the dollar benefit, I'll invest in it. And we just need to get something that's close. So we're constantly researching and constantly looking into stuff. Specifically, the one that is closest for us, it is conventional biomass. It's with the Cantonville Community Partnership, based on legislation that was created in 2012, SB 1122. It created a market for small-scale biomass, very similar to what you just said, is like you pictured, like on every ridge top from the Oregon border to Mexico, we have these units. That's what this really is. It's small-scale biomass. So we've invested heavily in that. It's close to being actually started, construction. However, even on the scale of the work we're doing in partnership with the Tahoe National Forest, it's just a small it could only handle a small percentage of the material that will come from these projects. So.
Yeah, I would just add a couple things. First of all, Yuba Water Agency is a mile ahead of almost any other water agency in the state. And Martha's right. Most water agencies in the state are not willing to invest in their headwaters because they say that there's not a quantified benefit for their water supply that's been identified. I think it's really short-sighted. We're on this broad campaign to get more water agencies to invest in the watersheds, and Yuba Water Agency, Placer County Water Agency are leaders on that. I think we all agree that we need to move to these new technologies that will allow us to sustainably manage the forest. It needs to be ecologically based, so this is not an excuse for industrializing the forest, but we need to apply these technologies. We have a couple of major challenges, including the fact that we've externalized all of these costs, including the wildfire costs, meaning we haven't counted the avoided cost of actually making these investments. So they feel like really expensive investments. And biomass, which is the burning of wood to create electricity, is really expensive compared to solar and wind, and also emits pollution. So when we talk to our colleagues that are energy regulators, they say, energy rates are going through the roof. We're concerned about investing in technologies that are more expensive than what we could, procure energy for. So we're in a really, I think, a long-lasting conversation with them to start to quantify these avoided costs, because that's really important. How do we manage, this transition? How do we subsidize this transition to be able to do this? No doubt the technologies are there, and many are zero carbon emission technologies. We just have to figure out how we take those promising technologies and bring them to scale. Last point, the state is coming up with an update of its wood utilization strategy. In other words, how we're partnering with the federal agencies, local agencies to do just this. So if you're interested, maybe through SYRCL, we're going to be out with that strategy in the next 3 to 6 months, and that would be a conversation that we could have.
All right.
The one-liner is, if you want the Sierra Nevada to be a carbon sink instead of a carbon source, you've got to sequester that material, not burn it.
A hard thing to even get it off the ground. They've been talking about, Steve Eubanks has been trying to get one in right here in Nevada County. It hasn't happened yet. That's been over 10 years. So anyways, my property is just south of the North Yuba Partnership. So my question is there any talk about expanding the North Yuba Partnership to the Middle Fork? Because I'm just north of the Middle Fork, and I'm overwhelmed with trying to thin my forest. I have 3 chainsaws.
But only 2 arms.
But I'm slightly overwhelmed, and I'm not sure, there's the EQIP program that I could qualify for. Are there other programs that are in the works for private property owners like myself that don't have a lot of wealth?
Yeah, so the question is, All right. Yep. So, yep, question is about increasing pace and scale, increasing the between national or public lands, private lands, and one of the things that I'm going to start because I also have a mic. I am actually, SYRCL is actively working with Nevada Irrigation District, the other water agency, trying to look at this North Yuba Forest partnership, scratching our heads, working with Zachary that we saw on screen, saying, okay, well, what does the South Yuba Forest Partnership and Middle Yuba Forest Partnership look like? So big picture, yeah, it took a lot to get the North Yuba off the ground, but we're trying to do that for the rest of the watershed as well. And
yeah, I'll just say, so really the question is, in my mind, about where do you go first? And what about the people that aren't first? And I mean, I think we have to start somewhere. And so, you know, we didn't randomly select the North Yuba watershed. There was a lot of analysis that went into where's the biggest fire risk, where are we going to have the most impact, and so that's where we're starting. However, as Aaron pointed out, that model that we've developed collectively is spreading to other places, and it was just a year and a half ago, actually, when the governor's task force met here in Grass Valley, that we actually signed the Middle Truckee River Forest Partnership, which is modeled after the North Yuba. And so, you know, I think this idea that we're all going to come together, we're going to work together for common goals and bring whatever resources that we have to the table, not worry about whose jurisdiction and who's, you know, we all want the same outcomes. And so if we focus on that and work together watershed by watershed, I think we'll get there.
Okay, so specific to your issue where you are, like Ellie said, there were a lot of planning went into, you know, why we chose the North Yuba Forest and the boundary there, watershed, landscape scale. Really kind of reading the future of this work, it was, we got to think bigger, we got to think larger, we got to think faster. So we looked at landscape scale, watershed scale. So that's one of the reasons we chose the North Yuba boundary, which is a watershed boundary. However, because you're in Yuba County, sir, and you have an interest, and I mentioned our local Fire Safe Council in the past, one of the reasons Yuba Water Agency jumped in with both feet on the North Yuba Forest Partnership was because it was scalable and it was large and it was something we could get going that could be replicated throughout the West. However, the issue with the small, you have 40 acres, you said? Okay, 100 acres. So once you go to these smaller parcels, and I mentioned the 5, 10s, and 20s before, you have so many different interests involved. You have a lot more folks that have to get on board with the plan, whatever the plan is. I would just ask you to give me a call. I'll hook you up with the Yuba Fire Safe Council, and we'll see what landowners in your area have reached out to them. We can add you to the conglomerate and see if there's something on a smaller scale we could do. And I have an interest in your watershed. It's not part of the North Yuba project, but it doesn't have to be to do something good there.
all right, right there in the back.
Yeah, thank you. A couple of things.
Questions, I hope.
Questions. The urgency, of course, is pretty obvious in terms of thinning the forest, reducing the density of the trees and so on. But I'm trusting, and I assume that in the planning for the treatment projects, forest structure and wildlife considerations are taken into account. Retaining snags for cavity nesting birds and all that sort of thing. I just like to hear that reinforced. And then I think these projects have been going on for some time in different parts of the state, and perhaps there's been some follow-up studies in terms of how quickly maybe vegetation returns to the clear areas. I've been in some parts of the state, the Sierras, where I think I've been in past treatment areas, and I've seen these dense carpets of young conifers all about the same height, you know, throughout the lower structure. But anyway, there's going to be follow-up costs, I'm sure, to keep making them clear. But if burning is done, then the costs of maintaining are going to be less than the cost of the capital investment to get them to the place where they need to be in the first place. And those factors probably are all being considered way in the future, I'm sure. But I just wanted to throw those out there to show that that's a long-term picture.
Yeah. So, question again about sort of the biologic monitoring, making sure that when we are removing wood, when we are removing trees, confirming that we're doing that with following best available science, and then what is post-project monitoring, what does follow-up work look like? And before we jump in, I'm going to invite Melinda Booth up to the front to join our panel in the back, because she was instrumental in creating this partnership and representing SYRCL. And just noticed that she's up back there.
So I'll try and answer very quickly. So yes, we did years of surveying for biological resources, both wildlife, botany, et cetera, archaeological resources. We did a 3-year analysis. It's very robust. You're welcome to look at it online. It's called the North Yuba Landscape Restoration Project Environmental Impact Statement. We did put in a lot of measures to try and balance everything, because I think your point is we don't want to do a lot of harm as we try and achieve the long-term forest structure. So yeah, we did keep that in mind. And then on your second question, I can do that. Perfect.
Yeah. So I know you've got the data, probably the same data I have, but we've analyzed every wildfire polygon in the Sierra Nevada and every treatment polygon in the Sierra Nevada for how fast they recover. The water use, on average, comes back in 10 to 15 years. That is, the water benefit you can think of as being about 15 years, but it decreases over time. It takes maybe 30 or more years for the carbon to come back, because you're getting just less biomass there on the ground. Is that the way you see it? Yeah.
And then how frequently do you have to go back in there? Because, you know, you've educated me, Ellie, and it's not mission accomplished once you go and you introduce prescribed fire or vegetation thinning. How frequently do you have to do this?
Yeah, so we try and get back in 2 to 5 years. But, you know, as we increase the scale of restoration, our ability to go back and do that prescribed fire, which, yes, is much cheaper. It's like $500 to $1,000 an acre instead of $2,000 to $5,000 an acre. We just need more people who are certified, capable of going back and doing those maintenance treatments.
Yeah, both next to each other. We've got time for both. Go ahead.
I just wondered if you've done any modeling. A lot of the cost is bringing the equipment in, taking stuff out. What if you've got a gang of people with chainsaws? You went in and 1 out of 100 trees, you just cut around the canopy and lake. It will fall over time. You don't have to do a lot of work. Has anybody modeled that?
So, questions about different ways of forest management and trying to decrease that, you know, $2,000 to $5,000 an acre cost for thinning trees.
I mean, when you model the wildfire flame length, which is a measure of severity, the more fuel you have on the ground, the more flame length you're going to get, and the more flame length you're going to get on the ground fire, the quicker it's going to get up into the canopy. And I think that's what actually happens.
Yeah, there's just so much material in the forest right now. We have to remove some of it, or otherwise we're not going to achieve our goals.
Yep. So there, and then in the back, and then over there if we got time.
My question is a little bit simple. I live in the foothills. I actually know people that are working right now up in the projects. I'm seeing two things. I see this community of Brownsville challenge that used to be based on timber, and indeed it's a very devastated place right now. A couple of people I know, they are back to logging. They're back to doing work for Willie and you guys. There's a bit of respect coming back. I like that very much, and my question is, how do you get more people? Because even in my own town, Organhouse, the Yuba Water Agency has sponsored roadside thinning. We see crews, we see young people, we see people with hard hats. We complain about the traffic and all that. It's absolutely wonderful to see that economic activity happening with trees, with chainsaws, and how are you thinking to entice people to jump in?
Yeah, so the question is about workforce development. How do we continue to build the skill set, build the education necessary to keep doing this kind of good work?
I'll just say it's really encouraging to hear that this work is getting people employed. Some folks that lost their jobs in forestry are now back working, and that's exactly what we want to see. As was pointed out, we do have a real workforce challenge, which is we need so-called burn bosses that can oversee these prescribed fire. We need more folks that are forest technicians, watershed technicians. There's a ton of funding that's coming in from our governments, federal and state government, on training young people, including tribal members. So we have a tribal conservation corps. We have these different conservation corps, but we have to do it quick. So it's retraining people that lost their jobs and training young people so that they can stay in these communities with good paying jobs. I have a question for Melinda, which is good to see you. So now that you have a little bit of distance from this project and this effort, I can take over for Aaron. What's your take on sort of lessons learned from your leadership and then what you're seeing now?
Well, hi, I'm honored to have been invited up. Thank you. So I moved to Montana about a year ago, and we're experiencing all of the same issues. And I would guess we're maybe 10 to 15 years kind of behind where we are here. And one of the first things that I did when I moved there is I had a meeting with our forest supervisor on the Flathead National Forest, and I said, hey, I was doing all this really cool stuff, and what are you doing? And they're not there at all. And so what I realized is the work that is happening here, that the North Yuba Forest Partnership in particular is really special. And we're all sitting here, you hear about it, and you're like, well, duh, it's a no-brainer. Of course, this is what we're doing. But it's not a no-brainer in all the other places that it needs to happen. And so what's happening here is a model, and if we can figure out how to make it replicable and really get people on board, it's gonna have, I believe there will be real change. The question is the pace and the scale, right? All the things that we're talking about, how do we make that happen? But so my reflection is that what I was really lucky and honored to be a part of, getting off the ground here, is special and valuable and meaningful, and every hour and every heartache and every argument and late night and every whiskey around the campfire, it's valuable and meaningful. And what we did was create genuine relationships amongst people from very diverse backgrounds who have a similar goal. And when you can create those personal, genuine relationships, you can get really hard work done, and that's what's happening here. But it takes time.
This can't go unsaid. Someone asked earlier, who's not at the table? And that's an appropriate question, like who else needs to be here? But I think we need to recognize who is at the table, because I don't know that many people or many groups are doing what this group has done. And now that Melinda's sitting up here, we can truly call out who is at the table. And Erin's continuing what she's doing. But I gotta say, doing the North Yuba Forest Partnership or anything that I've been involved in Yuba County takes people that are creative and open-minded and want to do things different. And so Ellie, as the forest supervisor on the Tahoe, we would not be where we are without an open-minded guy like Ellie. Wade's leadership at the state level, it's totally opened up opportunities that kind of that parallel with the North Yuba Forest Partnership and the other stuff I talked about, these healthy forest grants that we're working on with CAL FIRE in that space. Aaron's leadership at SYRCL following along with Melinda, and then the academics, Martha and Roger, and then there's many others. I'm going to leave somebody out, but let's recognize the people that are at the table that are kind of setting the tone for what needs to be done, what can be done, and how we can implement it going forward. So I have to say that.
I want to follow up with what Louis just said, because when we came to California, where we've been here about 20 years, we started a project that was called SNAP, Sierra Nevada Adaptive Management Project. And we couldn't find Forest Service partners. It took a long time. We got 2 forests to help us. I think what has happened over the last 20 years is really amazing. And this partnership and the one in the American River, again, there's another big community-driven project, are so important for showing the rest of the state how we can move forward. So I just want to say you did a great job. Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Well, I think we got one more question. All right, one more question. I think it actually was there. Yep.
So my question is an education question for these young people. I teach biology and AP environmental science in Auburn. I've been there for 3 decades. And it took that long to get these kids to believe in climate change, okay? They do now, all of them, okay? But they don't believe in this forest thing yet. And I'm wondering if we have enough time, okay? Because we're talking about, is the place gonna burn up before they believe in it? And I have guest speakers come from all kinds of different groups. And I have a director of Caltrans who's in charge of all the forests along the highway. I have one of the El Dorado County, the Forest Service directors come, and they did a bunch of thinning and then it all burned up in the King Fire. And I've been watching, so I've known this myself for 20 years, but I don't know. I'm just really disappointed myself. I can't get kids to sign up for AP Environmental Science now. We used to have 2 sections. I think they're burnt out on climate change. I think they don't want to hear it anymore. And I just wonder how you think we can reach these people when something's got to be done about their forest.
All right, so question is about keeping people inspired, motivated, and invested in doing the hard work, especially younger folks. Bring them to the Film Fest next year. I'll say that, and then I'm going to pass the mic.
Well, yeah, let them see this movie. But I have to say, we did an earlier movie, and we spent a lot of time defining the problem, but not the solutions. And the difference is, and certainly it's here, there's sessions on solutions. And I think if we want to keep young people involved and get them involved, we have to show them there's a path. And just, it's not that the world's falling apart, but we actually have ways forward. Yeah.
And so first, thank you for all your work. I have a 17-year-old. Really appreciate what you do. And the other thing I'll say is, just from my 17-year-old, if you can make it look fun, get them out there to try it. Get them out there to try it, because, I mean, I'm telling you, you put a drip torch in a 17-year-old's hand in a safe way, they're, I mean, it's fun. If you haven't done it, by the way, any of you, it's super fun if you're doing it in a safe way. So I think there's, but we have to go about it differently. We can't just like post jobs in the newspaper and assume that somebody's going to apply to it. We're going to have to take different approaches.
And I want to say,
Conservation Corps. Yeah. Biden administration announced it.
Yep.
Civilian Conservation Corps.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, Jerry Brown in his first go-around created the California Conservation Corps, founded. Amazing. So still going strong. 1,500 young people every year come through that program that are now doing this work across the state. We also have local corps. As I said, we now have tribal corps, and now we have the American Climate Corps, which is based on something we created in California under this governor called the California Climate Corps. So young people, for the first, I mean, I think more than ever, there are pathways to do that. Now we just have to figure out how to engage them so they'll take advantage of it.
All right. So we are out of time. We've got a quick transition. Big round of applause for the panel. This was fantastic. Thank you all so much for being here. Still plenty of more film festival. We've got awards shows this evening and Monday night. So all of the award-winning films you can see. If you want to see those award-winning films, come to one of the theaters, either in Nevada City or Grass Valley, and stay both nights. And that way you can see all the award winners. Thank you all very much.